Now, I want to bring in Garrett Ahern. Garrett, you're making a submission tomorrow before the Oireachtas Committee on Assisted Dying because you have very personal experience of all of this.
Yes, Katie.
Just to explain to people, you assisted your wife, Vicky, to die in Belgium just last April. So first of all, can I just say our sympathies? This is very, very, very raw and recent for you. Can you just maybe, first of all, tell us what kind of a person Vicky was?
Well, Vicky was 47. She was a Latin and Greek lecturer in UCC. She was very vibrant, very bubbly, and loved life. Vicky had been a cancer patient for 10 years prior to her death. And the one thing I would say about Vicky's terminal illness, and perhaps it's true of all people with terminal illness, that when you live with a terminal illness, you live each day to the fullest because you have this realization that that time is finite. So the years that we spent together married were just full of happiness and joy and adventures. So she really was a truly wonderful person.
The decision was made to go to Belgium.
The decision, in my opinion, had been made earlier that year by Vicky. And as was previously alluded to, I was kept out of that decision-making process. This was presented to me at the start of April as a fait accompli, an ultimatum, one that I was under no obligation to have to acquiesce to. But my wife said that she could not endure her sufferings any longer and that she was going to travel to Belgium, her home country, and I had to make a decision as to whether or not I would accompany her or whether or not she would contact one of her Belgian friends to do so.
You decided to go with her.
Of course.
You were by her side on the 21st of April.
I had been with Vicky for all of her cancer journey. I was not going to abandon her in her final sufferings, no. So I went. And
can you talk about the experience of that? Because I think it's for most of us who will never be there, it's an extraordinary step to take.
There are two aspects to the experience. One is the trauma, isolation and loneliness of having to travel to a country that wasn't my home and hadn't been Vicky's home for in excess of 20 years. We were completely cut off from our friends, our family and our emotional support system that we had here in Ireland. That was very traumatic for both of us. Again, the isolation and loneliness and coping with these final days and the final decision that had to take place. The procedure itself was carried out in one of Vicky's friends' house on the 21st of April. We had 2 medical consultations by the presiding doctor and then an independent second opinion. They both agreed that Vicky's condition was terminal and incurable, that she had told them she was in grave pain and that she had requested assisted dying, and they agreed. She met the criteria by Belgian law. At 2 o'clock on the 21st, after we had had what should have been a joyful morning with friends, had we been able to do this earlier in the year when Vicky wished, it would have perhaps been a joyful morning with friends. Vicky reminisced with her friends. At 2 o'clock, the doctor called, had a consultation with Vicky. And at 2:10, the doctor administered a general anaesthetic. Prior to that, he had told me that it was Vicky's wishes to proceed and that he was obliged to do what his patient had asked him. The general anaesthetic is administered while Vicky lies on a couch while I hold her hand. A minute after that, a muscle relaxant is prepared. There's probably other medications involved, but I was told it was a muscle relaxant. And within 5 seconds of that being administered, all visible signs of life that I could see had ceased in my wife. And for the first time in months, the harrowing furrows of pain were gone from her face, and I knew that she was finally relieved of her sufferings.
I know this is such a difficult place to bring you back to, and I'm sorry, but you're going to do this again tomorrow, Garrett. Yes. Why are you doing it?
9,000 people die a year of cancer in this country. Anecdotally, I believe that not all of them die the peaceful death that has been suggested. If it is a peaceful death, it is a death of palliative sedation while we wait for the illness or death to ultimately take that patient, which can take days or weeks. I grant you that they possibly are comfortable during that state, but it is distressing for probably the patient and those around them in the time leading up to that. I believe that there needs to be a choice for the Irish people to have their say as to whether or not they believe that a dignified, peaceful death is an option for them, or whether or not we must endure with the system that we have for all these years.
Okay, Gareth, thank you so much for that. Can I bring in Sammy now? Sammy Leslie, how are you? Sammy, you got in touch with us when we put out that call out because you wanted your voice heard in this. You were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis a number of years ago. Did that change your view on this?
I've been in and out of hospital since my late 20s, early 20s, and then I had breast cancer, and then a year later was diagnosed with MS around the same time Mary Fleming was going through her battle, and I thought if this ever gets to progressive, I really don't want to go down the same road as her, and for me it made the diagnosis a lot worse. I work with horses. Our horses have the right to a dignified end. There is a point where it's terminal and it's degrading, and if I put my horse through what some people have to suffer, I would be prosecuted. I just don't understand why animals have more of a right to a dignified end than us mere humans. And if you look at the stats in the UK, because I couldn't find the Irish stats, it's reckoned that 7% of suicides are people with terminal illnesses that will do it anyway, one way or the other. So I really welcome this debate, that we can have a grown-up conversation in this country around a difficult topic like this, and about how do we create the platform for choice and minimise as much of the possible risk of abuse. I mean, you've done lots of research. Australia seems to have a fairly good handle on a parallel system, so it takes the pressure off the actual GPs and the medical providers. But we need a really good debate. It's not until you're faced with the possibility of having to go through that it brings home. My heart breaks for what you've had to go through. It really does. You know, as you say, what should be a joyous time. You know, death is the ultimate goodbye. Could we just please be able to say it at home to our friends and loved ones in a dignified way?
Now, Dr. Austin Carl, thanks for coming into us tonight. Now, you've had a disability yourself since birth.
Yeah.
And I know you have a personal position on assisted dying. We can get to that in a moment. But I know that disability advocates have concerns, I mean, very legitimate concerns perhaps, where this might bring us if we open this door, where that might lead us. And you know, other concerns that are shared by people representing more vulnerable people.
I think the concerns are, my own position is I'm supportive of it, but the concerns that at the same time I think are valid. And the concerns go back to the issue of what is the choice. So I think if someone wants to choose, they want to take their life because they're in huge suffering, I respect that and I absolutely support it. If someone wants to choose to die because they're afraid of being a burden on their family or on their loved ones, I have concerns about that as a society that I'm going to be a member of. And we're living in an increasingly individualistic society. Like 50 years ago, people were cared for at home right till their deaths. Nowadays, you're much more likely to end up in a nursing home, with the greatest respect to people in nursing homes and who provide that care. I don't know if if I had a choice between dying in a facility like that versus dying at home with my family, I much prefer the option. And the second one would make me think I feel less valued. So I think we need to ensure as a society, ask the question, are we going to start to give people support? How are we going to ensure people aren't going to choose to stop being a burden on others? And how are we going to give the supports into people in the community that where they can survive, they can be at home and be cared for at home? I know my own father was cared by my own family. I have a friend I was only talking to tonight whose father had a condition very like motor neuron disease, and he was cared for by his family. And both of us have said that our parents, even though they said don't keep us alive, wanted to stay alive because their family was around. So I think it's about that choice to ensure that when people are choosing, it's a clear choice and that we give the full supports to them.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Carl. Can I bring in now Professor Siobhan McHale? You're a psychiatrist.
That's right.
Can you explain to us why the College of Psychiatrists have come out against any change in this?
Yes, the College of Psychiatrists of Ireland, of which I'm a member, had a position paper published in 2021 opposing the introduction of a change of legislation to introduce physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia, in recognising the significant medical, psychological and social ramifications of the introduction of direct and indirect death of patients with terminal illness and vulnerable patients. Acknowledging the distress associated with knowing one has a terminal illness, but also in that context, the unintended consequences of introducing physician-assisted suicide. I work in a general hospital, so I work with patients both in the emergency department who present with suicidal ideation or acts of self-harm, and also on the wards with patients with motor neuron disease, patients with cancer, patients with terminal life-ending conditions. There is no difference in the suffering that is shown by patients in each of these areas. Suicide is the response to not finding any alternative way of managing suffering other than ending one's own life. And whether it is done through physician-assisted suicide or a patient's own suicide, we're talking about the same process. As a psychiatrist, as doctors, as a society, we are very focused on ensuring that people who are suicidal receive every other alternative available to assist them with their suffering. And what I would say in relation to the very sad stories that are being discussed here and the very real pain and suffering, we're not doing well enough at the moment. We are not doing well enough in how we're providing care and palliative care and psychiatric care to our patients. But saying that, ending life is not the solution to how we improve that situation. We need to improve our psychiatric services, we need to improve our palliative care services, and we need to do a lot more research into end-of-life suffering and palliation.
Okay, thank you for that.